The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and betrayal, the kind that stings worse than a wasp's bite. I stood on the edge of my own damn ranch, boots sinking into the Wyoming dirt, staring at the woman who just screamed at me like I was some vagrant sneaking through her backyard. Karen, oh, you'd know her type from a mile away, stood there, arms crossed, her lips pursed so tight they could have cracked walnuts. Her voice, shrill as a rusted gate, still echoed in my ears, "You're trespassing, and I'm calling the sheriff." The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, and I swear the wind carried the faint whine of her entitlement. My ranch. My home. My family's legacy for 3 generations. And here was this homeowners association tyrant, barely 6 months in the neighborhood, telling me I didn't belong. I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like you're swallowing a storm. "Ma'am," I said, slow and deliberate, my voice low like the rumble of distant thunder, "this is my land. Been mine since before you were born." Her eyes narrowed, and she jabbed a manicured finger at the clipboard in her hand, some official-looking homeowners association nonsense she'd printed off the internet. "The covenants say this path is community property," she snapped, her voice slicing through the evening calm. "You can't just wander wherever you please." I almost laughed, but the weight of her audacity pressed against my chest like a lead blanket. Community property? On my 200 acres. I'd written the damn laws that govern this county's land rights. I'd spent sleepless nights in law school, ink-stained fingers drafting the very statutes she was misquoting. But she didn't know that. Not yet. The crunch of gravel under tires pulled my attention away. A beat-up pickup rolled up, kicking up dust that shimmered in the fading light. Out stepped old man Tucker, my neighbor since I was a kid, his weathered face creased with worry. His dog, a scruffy mutt named Rusty, yipped from the passenger seat, tail thumping against the cracked leather. Tucker wasn't part of the HOA, he'd laughed them off years ago, but he'd been around long enough to know trouble when he saw it. "Elliot," he said, tipping his hat, his voice gravelly like he'd smoked one too many cigars, "this lady's been pokin' around, puttin' up signs on folks' fences." He gestured to a neon orange, "No trespassing," sign nailed to my own gate, the paint still wet. My blood boiled, but I kept my face steady. Karen didn't even flinch, just huffed like we were inconveniencing her evening. I turned back to her, my boots scuffing the dirt as I stepped closer. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, something cheap and floral, like a funeral parlor trying too hard. "You put that sign on my gate?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. Her chin lifted, defiant. "It's for the community's safety," she said, as if I were some outlaw. "We have rules, mister," she paused, fishing for my name, but I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. "Elliot Kane," I said, letting the name hang like a warning shot. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't back down. "Well, Mr. Kane, the homeowners association has authority here, and I'm enforcing it." That's when Tucker chuckled, a low, raspy sound that made Rusty perk up in the truck. "Lady," he said, shaking his head, "you got no idea who you're messin' with." The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, the one my grandfather carved from oak he felled himself. The wood was worn smooth from years of coffee mugs and family fights, and today it held a stack of legal documents, land deeds, county records, and the HOA's own bylaws, which I'd pulled from the county clerk's office at dawn. The coffee in my mug was cold, but my pulse was hot, pounding like a war drum. Karen had escalated things. She'd called the sheriff, just like she'd threatened, and now a deputy was on his way. Fine. Let her dig her own grave. The deputy was young, barely 30, with a nervous twitch in his jaw that said he hated being dragged into homeowners association drama. He stepped out of his cruiser, boots crunching on the gravel drive, and tipped his hat. "Mr. Kane," he said, his voice polite but wary, "got a complaint about trespassing and property disputes." Karen stood behind him, smug as a cat with a canary, her clipboard now tucked under her arm like a badge of honor. I invited them inside, the screen door creaking as it swung shut. The house smelled of cedar and old leather, a comfort that grounded me as I laid out the deeds on the table. "Deputy," I said, sliding the papers toward him, This ranch has been in my family since 1892. I own every inch of it, free and clear. And I wrote the county's land use laws in '98. Check the signature. The deputy's eyes widened as he scanned the documents, his fingers tracing my name on the legal code. Karen's face, though, she went pale, like someone had yanked the rug out from under her. That's not possible," she stammered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "The homeowners association has jurisdiction." I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight, and let out a long, slow sigh. "Karen," I said, her name tasting bitter on my tongue, "the HOA's bylaws don't supersede state law. And they sure as hell don't apply to private land." The deputy nodded, his discomfort melting into something like respect. "Ma'am," he said, turning to her, "you might want to rethink this one." But Karen wasn't done. "Oh, no." She doubled down, her voice rising to a pitch that could have shattered glass. "This is outrageous," she shrieked, slamming her clipboard on the table. A pen rolled off, clattering to the floor, and Rusty, who'd followed Tucker inside, let out a low growl. "I'll take this to court. I'll sue you for defamation, for harassment." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world's holding its breath. Tucker coughed, hiding a grin. The deputy shifted on his feet, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. And me? I felt something shift inside, like a dam breaking. I stood, slow and deliberate, and walked to the window. The view stretched out over my land, rolling hills, the glint of the creek, the silhouette of my horses grazing in the distance. This was mine. And no clipboard-wielding, power-hungry newcomer was going to take it. The courtroom was small, the kind of place where the air smells of polished wood and old coffee. It was a month later, and Karen had made good on her threat. She'd rallied half the homeowners association, a gaggle of nervous suburbanites who'd moved out here thinking they could tame the wild with their rules and regulations. They sat in the gallery, whispering, their eyes darting between me and Karen, who stood at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer looking like he'd rather be golfing. I didn't need a lawyer. I was my own. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with silver hair and a voice like gravel, peered over her glasses. "Mr. Kane," she said, "you're representing yourself?" I nodded, my heart steady despite the weight of every eye in the room. "Yes, Your Honor. I wrote the laws we're arguing about. Figure I know them well enough." The trial was quick but brutal. Karen's lawyer threw around terms like easement and community rights, but every time he opened his mouth, I countered with the actual statutes, chapter, verse, and precedent. I'd spent years in dusty law libraries, fighting for ranchers like my father, like Tucker, like me. I knew every loophole, every clause. Karen's face grew redder with each rebuttal, her hands trembling as she clutched her precious clipboard. The final blow came when I presented the original survey maps, proving the path she'd claimed as community property was squarely on my deed. The judge's gavel came down like a thunderclap. "Case dismissed," she said, her voice final. "Ms. Thompson, you're ordered to remove all unauthorized signs and cease harassment of Mr. Kane. Further violations will result in fines." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but I didn't hear them. I heard the wind outside, the same wind that swept across my ranch, carrying the scent of freedom. Karen stormed out, her heels clicking furiously, but not before I caught the look in her eyes, defeat, raw and bitter. Tucker clapped me on the shoulder as we left, his laugh warm and rough. "You showed her, Elliot," he said. "You showed 'em all." That night, I sat on my porch, a beer in hand, the stars sprawling above like a promise kept. The air was cool, scented with pine and earth, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. I thought about my grandfather, who'd fought his own battles to keep this land. I thought about the law, the words I'd written to protect people like us from people like Karen. Justice isn't always loud, it's in the quiet moments, the ones where you know you've stood your ground. And as the stars burned brighter, I knew one thing for sure, this ranch, this life, was mine. No one, not even a Karen with a clipboard, could take that away.